Hi guys, in today's class we will talk about mobility of factors of production. What does a factor mobility mean? Factor mobility measures the extent to which factors of production such as land, labor, capital can easily switch between alternative uses. So what is their ability to switch easily between occupations? There are two types of mobility. One is occupational. One is your occupational mobility, and the other one is your geographic mobility. So, what is occupational mobility? Occupational mobility refers to how easily your factors of production can switch between jobs or how easily they can switch between different occupations. And geographic mobility or geographical mobility measures the extent to how easily factors can switch geographic locations. So, like for example, if one factor of production is in one country, one city, or one geographic region, and then it moves to another region, that is the geographical mobility. And if one factor of production moves from one sector or into another sector or into another job, then it is referred to as your occupational mobility. So now let's talk about the mobility of all of the factors of production, the four factors of production that we have so far discussed: land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So let's talk about land. Land, as far as the geographical mobility is concerned, land is geographically immobile. Like you cannot move coal field of third to, let's say, Saudi Arabia, or you cannot move the oil fields of Saudi Arabia to third or to Pakistan. So from that perspective, land is geographically immobile or immovable. You cannot move the land. So land is geographically immobile. But as far as the occupational mobility of land is concerned, land can be occupationally mobile. Land can be occupationally mobile. Like you can switch land in between different resources, in between different production processes. Like for instance, if we have one one place or one premises where we have where the entrepreneurs have developed hospital, they can switch that land into another occupation, like for instance building a bank over there, building a school over there, building a restaurant over there. So land is occupationally mobile. Now let's talk about our second factor of production, labor. Whenever we talk about the geographical and occupational mobility of labor, it varies. Although labor is geographically and occupationally mobile, like you can move from one geographic location, from one city, from one country, from one region to another, if you have better career opportunities over there. But similarly, land labor can be occupationally mobile as well. Like for instance, someone can switch from being in banking to being in teaching, but there are certain factors that affect the mobility of labor, that affect the geographic as well as the occupational mobility of labor. For instance, there are certain factors that can make labor geographically immobile. Factors that can make labor geographically immobile can include cultural differences. Like for instance, you will not move into a city, into a region, into a country where there are cultural differences, where there are religious differences, where there are linguistic differences. They hinder your geographic mobility. Similarly, what is the cost of relocation? Like if the cost of relocation is too high, then probably you won't move into another country, another region, another city for better occupation, because obviously all the extra money that you will earn will be spent over your cost of relocation. And then you can also include family. Like for instance, if someone has aging parents, if someone has children uh, in one city, in one country, then probably they are less likely to move as compared to people who don't have uh, family, or who don't have any of such factors that can hinder their ability to move from one geographic location to another. Similarly, although labor is occupationally mobile as well, like labor can move from or can switch between different occupations, but there are again certain factors that can hinder the occupational mobility. For instance, factors that can hinder occupational mobility of labor can include years of education or demand for labor, in that industry, or attitude towards work. Like for instance, if there are more number of years of education required, then you are probably less likely to switch to that occupation, because first you need to spend uh, all those years educating yourself, and once you are done with educating yourself, then you will move into the occupation. For instance, if there is a high demand of doctors in any country during the pandemic, but not many people can switch in the medication profession, or can switch to health profession. Why? Because you need to have uh, 5 years of education, then you need training, development, etc., etc. So that makes that hinders the occupational mobility. Similarly, what is the demand for labor? If the demand for labor in that occupation or in that industry is low, then you won't earn much money in that occupation. And when you won't earn much money in that occupation, obviously you won't switch to that occupation. And what is the attitude towards work? Like, for instance, in many countries, there are certain professions where uh, the attitude towards work is not very good. Like if you are in the profession of politics, or if you are in the profession of policing, then the attitude towards work is not very good. People don't like the nature of your job, and when they don't like the nature of your job, they won't respect you. And once they won't be respecting you, there are very bleak chances of you joining that occupation. Then we have the third factor of production, which is capital. Again, the geographic and the occupational mobility of capital depends upon the nature of the capital good. For instance, if we talk about an oil drilling plant, if the oil drilling plant is placed somewhere, then it is geographically immovable because it is very difficult, it is very costly to move that oil drilling plant or oil rig to into from one geographic location to another. But let's say if we have a laptop, or if we have a machinery that is smaller in size, that machinery can be geographically movable. So basically the geographic mobility depends upon the nature of the capital, what type of capital good we are talking about. If we are talking about an oil drilling rig or heavy machinery that is very difficult, that is very costly to move, then that machinery will be most probably geographically immobile. But if the machinery is easy to move, not very costly, then it can be geographically mobile. Similar is the case with occupational mobility. Sometimes the capital goods can be occupationally mobile depending upon the nature of the capital goods, and sometimes they are not occupationally mobile. For instance, if we have, again, let's talk about a laptop. A laptop can be occupationally mobile because a laptop can be used in schools, a laptop can be used in hospitals, a laptop can be used in banks. But if we have uh, machines like MRI or CT scan machines, those machines cannot be used in any other profession. Like you cannot use MRI or CT scan machines in schools, in banks. Their only purpose is to be used in the health industry, in the healthcare industry. So if you have specialized capital particular to that industry, then it will be occupationally immobile as well. So MRI or CT scan machines are occupationally, they are occupationally immobile. Similarly, oil drilling plant is geographically immobile. But a laptop will be both geographically mobile as well as occupationally mobile. And then we have the last factor of production. The last factor of production is enterprise. Enterprise is the most mobile factor of production, both geographically as well as occupationally, because entrepreneurs can relocate, they can change the nature of the job in search of higher profitability and in search of minimization of the risk. So basically, the basic purpose for entrepreneurs is to maximize their profits and minimize the risk. So, in order to maximize the profits or the returns and minimize the risk, they can change locations, they can change occupations. And enterprise will be the most mobile factor of production, because we have seen firms relocating into other countries, we have seen firms changing the nature of the job in search of higher profitability or in search of lower risk. Okay, guys, take care. That's all.